how's it going, friends? Thank you for tuning in to VR Revelations. Welcome. Please make sure you give this video a like and make sure you subscribe for future coverage. So, it is March 16th, the year of our Lord 2023. And as you can see here, I have a CNN article reporting on Poland, who has become the first country to pledge fighter jets to Ukraine. Now, Zelensky has been asking for fighter jets pretty much for the last couple of months. The United States has been refusing to give Ukraine fighter jets as well as other countries because, this is only going to escalate the conflict in Ukraine, and Russia has warned that, this is going to be crossing a red line for Russia. Now, Poland has sort of been at the forefront, right, of all this support for Ukraine. A couple of months ago, when Zelensky was asking for more tanks, Poland was one of the first to pledge tanks. They said that they had the German-made Leopard tanks. However, they needed permission from Germany in order to actually provide those tanks to Ukraine. But they even went as far as to say that if Germany took too long on its decision, they were just going to go ahead and provide these tanks to Ukraine. So it seems like, Poland has been, really aggressive towards Russia. And of course, Poland does have a history with Russia, and we can go back to World War II for that matter. But yeah, as you can see here on the map, Poland is a neighboring country to Ukraine, and whether you agree with their stance or not, of course, they are worried because they know that Russia is a major threat to their country, right? So they are worried that as Russia continues to advance, sooner or later they are going to be right on their border. And so they have more of a hostile or aggressive attitude towards Russia. And again, they are leading the way here by pledging these fighter jets. And we're going to be reading about this here from the CNN article. So, of course, this is American propaganda here, so take everything you read here with a grain of salt. But this will definitely be a huge development if Poland actually provides these fighter jets. Things are definitely going to escalate. Russia has made it clear that this is a red line for them and has warned other countries. But anyways, let's go ahead and jump into the article here. It says, Poland on Thursday pledged it would send 4 MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine. So it's not that many. As of right now, it looks like it's only going to be 4. But again, this is sort of what England did, right? So the United Kingdom, initially it was one of the first countries to actually decide to send tanks to Ukraine. I believe when they made that decision, they initially said they were going to send 12, but what they were trying to do is, open the door for other countries to have the courage to send more tanks. So this is probably what Poland is doing here. Obviously, 4 fighter jets isn't going to make that big of a difference, but this is kind of letting the United States and all these countries know, hey, look, we send our fighter jets. You guys can go ahead and send yours. We're all in this together. Don't worry about Russia's threats. But again, that's where they are wrong. They're not considering what Russia is saying. This is one of the reasons why Russia invaded Ukraine, because they didn't listen to Russia and their warnings. So again, they continue to make all these boneheaded moves that are only escalating the conflict and increasing the probabilities of a World War III or a nuclear conflict here. But the article goes on here, the first NATO member to do so in a significant move in Kyiv's battle to resist Russia's onslaught. Again, pay attention here. It says Poland is the first NATO member. So this is also part of the reason why Poland has been so bold in its stance against Russia, because they are part of this NATO alliance that Ukraine was trying to join, which was one of the reasons why Russia invaded, according to Vladimir Putin and the Russian government. Of course, one of the biggest, most known clauses in the NATO alliance is that if one country is attacked, then essentially that means that all of the other countries are being attacked also, and so they can all respond and come to the aid of that one country. So even though Poland is close to Russia here and is pretty close to the conflict, and essentially just like the U.S., they are partaking in this conflict as a proxy, or through their proxy, which in this case would be Ukraine. They feel a lot more confidence since they are part of NATO. But again, if push comes to shove between them and the Russians, Russia's not going to care that they are part of NATO. It will come into consideration, but again, Russia has drawn these red lines here concerning these fighter jets. Anyways, it goes on. President Andrzej Duda said the planes from about a dozen that it had inherited from the former German Democratic Republic would be handed over in the coming days after being serviced. When it comes to the MiG-29 aircraft, which are still operating in the defense of Polish airspace, a decision has been taken at the highest levels. That means they probably consulted with Washington. We can say confidently that we are sending MiGs to Ukraine, Duda said. Warsaw has taken a lead among NATO allies in supplying Kyiv with heavy weapons. The announcement that Poland will send the Soviet-designed planes marks a step beyond the rest of the alliance's commitments and could put pressure on other member states to do the same. There it is, guys. So this is sort of a signal to pressure other countries to also send fighter jets and more weapons. Other NATO nations have been reluctant to move far beyond a decision earlier this year to send tanks to Kyiv, and the U.S. insisted Thursday that Poland's move would not force Washington's hand. Again, remember, Biden also said that you would not see American tanks in Ukraine because that would mean World War III. We now know that was a lie. The U.S. has pledged to send their M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, even though apparently it's going to take a couple of months. So it says, speaking at a news conference in Warsaw with his new Czech counterpart, Peter Pavel, the Polish president expressed the two countries' joint backing for Kyiv. The Czech Republic and Poland are countries that are in the absolute vanguard, meaning at the forefront, when it comes to supporting Ukraine, both at humanitarian and military levels, President Duda said. So again, they're not shying away from the admission that they are supporting Ukraine militarily, which means they're involved in the war, maybe not directly, with their troops, but they're supplying the weapons, which it means you're involved in the war, right? Poland had been one of the most vocal European nations against Russia, just like I was saying, even before the invasion of Ukraine. Russia is still seen by many in Poland's political and diplomatic circles in a Cold War context. And I've often said, guys, everything going on in Ukraine is just pretty much a continuation of the Cold War, right? The United States there trying to install a government that is, pro-American and trying to create a barrier against Russia, except, they got too close to the sun, and Russia had to respond because of its national security protocols, right? So Putin has always been seen by Warsaw as untrustworthy, and Russian expansion is something to be fought against at all costs. It is one of the few NATO countries that by law is required to meet its 2% of GDP defense spending commitment and is an active member of the European defense community. Sending MiGs is not an unexpected move for Poland and complies entirely with its membership of NATO. Again, Ukraine is not part of NATO, so how does Ukraine play into that, uh, 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 membership? So, or those protocols there. It might change the dynamic within the alliance, acting as a catalyst for more countries to do so, or upset countries that are opposed to NATO getting more involved in the conflict, like Hungary. The biggest question will be if it puts pressure on the United Kingdom and the United States, which will then do the same for Germany, or which will then do the same for Germany. Ultimately, creating this pressure on other allies was probably Poland's intention. The White House said Thursday that Poland's decision to send the fighter jets is a sovereign decision that won't spur President Joe Biden to send F-16 aircraft. Doesn't change our calculus with respect to F-16s, said John Kirby, a top official at the U.S. National Security Council. These are sovereign decisions for any country to make, and we respect those sovereign decisions. He said, adding later, they get to determine not only what they're going to give, but how they're going to characterize it. I wouldn't think it's our place to characterize Poland's decision one way or another, Kirby said, declining to endorse the decision. Biden, who said earlier this year he would not ship U.S. fighter jets to Ukraine, won't be swayed by Poland's decision, he said. Again, the U.S. does this all the time. They say they won't do something, and then they end up doing it, right? So take all that with a grain of salt there. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz announced his country would provide 14 Leopard 2 tanks in January, bowing to intensifying international pressure led by the United States, Poland, and a bloc of other European nations, which called on Berlin to step up its military support and commit to sending their sought-after vehicles. The announcement was matched by the U.S., with President Joe Biden saying that he would provide 31 M1 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, reversing the administration's long-standing resistance to requests from Kyiv for the highly sophisticated but maintenance-heavy vehicles. So again, originally Biden said they would not send these tanks, and then they gave in. Again, this is all part of Washington's plan, right? They try to act like they're unwilling to, but they're literally the ones that are organizing this conflict. The only reason that Ukraine is still standing is because of the backing of the United States. So, they're the architects of this war, but they're trying to act like, we don't want to escalate things. So it's all just political propaganda during, wartime, pretty much. In addition to tanks, Ukraine has also been pushing for the U.S. to provide fighter jets, arguing that it needs the planes to defend against Russian missile and drone attacks. But that push has been met with skepticism by U.S. and allied officials who say the jets would be impractical because they require considerable training and Russia has extensive anti-aircraft systems that would easily shoot them down. They are right about that. I would agree with that. These in order to fly these jets, you have to train these soldiers, and that takes a while, and so it's not a process that you can hurry. If you do, then the planes are going to be useless. They're going to be driven by inexperienced pilots, and it's just going to make them even that much more vulnerable to Russia's anti-air systems. So this could mean that other pilots, such as NATO or American pilots, could be flying these things. You never know. But again, the thing is here that Russia has warned that any support for Ukraine concerning these fighter jets would be a red line. So again, things are only going to continue to escalate with this supply of fighter jets for Ukraine. U.S. and European officials have previously told CNN that F-16 fighter jets were impractical in the situation. Okay, I just read that. Again, it gets into other topics there, guys, but I just wanted to cover this, guys, because now we're going to have to wait on Russia's response, right? Again, the West, right, the United States, NATO, they continue to support Ukraine, but in such a small way that it's not really going to make a big difference in the conflict, right? It is it is making this war drag on, right? They're supplying just enough equipment to where it is slowing down the advance of the Russians, and just barely keeping Ukraine alive. But in order to, shift the tide of war, in order to give Ukraine a chance, Ukraine would literally need a whole new army. They would need hundreds, if not thousands, of tanks, hundreds of jets, of missiles, and even then, they would need nuclear weapons backing them down, because if Russia was ever threatened in such a way, of course they would resort to nuclear weapons. So, Ukraine would need those to keep a balance, right, for the fear of mutually assured destruction. So, because of all that, in my opinion, Ukraine never stood a chance. They just can't. Russia is superior, much the same way that the American army has been superior to all these other countries that it has invaded because of the capability of their weapons. But the U.S. here is trying to save face, and so they know eventually this war is going to end on Russia's terms. But as of now, they're just trying to keep this going as long as they can. So that's why you're seeing 4 jets here, a dozen from this country, another 10 from this one, which is probably what's going to happen, just like we saw with the tanks. But again, the Russians continue to advance and move forward, and they continue to destroy Ukrainian units with their superior armaments. And Ukraine is just hoping that NATO and the U.S. are gonna, come in for the rescue with their military, but it's not going to happen, because that would escalate things to a nuclear conflict, to a World War III conflict. And the U.S., as I've said before, is just not willing to risk the end of the world over Ukraine. But, they are making these decisions, which they are miscalculating, right? They're sort of testing the Russians. And so the Russians, they continue to warn of what they're going to do, and then the U.S. and NATO, they don't listen. They continue to test them, and then Russia goes through with their word. And so they said that, this is a red line, right? Supplying fighter jets to Ukraine is a red line for them, and this would only escalate things. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. Now we just have to wait and see what the U.S. says, what Germany, what all these other countries do. Are they going to follow suit here and also send their fighter jets, right? We'll just have to wait and see, guys. I believe it is going to happen, just like happened with the tanks. Again, just imagine, Ukraine is about to lose the war tomorrow, right? Do you think Germany and England and the U.S. are going to send fighter jets? Yeah, they probably are, right? Before Ukraine loses, they're probably going to send jets or long-range missiles, at least what Ukraine is asking for. But they're not going to send enough to actually be a major threat to Russia because, again, guys, nuclear weapons. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. And yeah, remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.